The other one, of course, during the week, the West Coast Eagles and how they come back from a 171-point loss. And not just that, the deeper, broader conversation about what they do next. Adam Simpson, their coach under pressure, was in a forthright mood during the week.
You're still getting a sense of fulfilment from the role, though?
Oh, it's difficult to get that now. I feel very protective at the moment and I want to support my players and my club. I'm not sure if that's fulfilment, but that's leadership, I suppose.
So he talked about leadership there, and you can understand how much pressure's on him at the moment, Lloydie. But what about the leadership from the rest of the club above him?
It's a good question. I think where I admired David Barham 10 months ago was that he did things without fear or favour. He didn't care what it was going to look like, or he was just what would be best for the football club. And I think that if you just want to make the odd move and think, OK, we'll move on our fitness coach and try and think that's going to appease people, you're not doing what's right. I think too many people in football clubs just worry about saving themselves. It's like being on the Titanic. Who can we save here? And I think West Coast have to do this properly. But who's it going to be? Who is that person within the West Coast Eagles who says, come on, are we really doing this properly? How's our development looking? How has our fitness been? OK, well, he's gone if he was in charge of fitness. But, Luke Shuey, did we keep him with contracts? Who's done that well? Trevor Nisbet, has he been here too long? Is there anyone within the West Coast Eagles which is going to show that form of leadership who's going to do this properly? Otherwise, you just make a few moves or here or there. Well, you're not going to go anywhere.
I've got a belief on this that they're just trying to get through these remaining 9 matches of the season with their current structure, because to blow it up now in a massive way would actually make what they have to do worse. And I refer there to Adam Simpson, got a contract for 2 more years. From the way I read it, I think he's probably safer than Trevor Nisbet is. Trevor Nisbet is contracted for next season, but has been there a long time, and there is...
Has he been there too long, Damo?
Well, you could make the argument they've got comfortable with their decisions, and I think to Lloydie's point, a lot of the list decisions, ultimately he's CEO, but he does oversee every department within the club, and I think an independent look at it is what I believe they're going to go down the path of, and how quickly they can get that together, and how that looks, and what that forms by way of a panel, and what scope it will have is being thrashed out behind closed doors. But yeah, I believe that they're just trying to play out until the end of the season.
Is independence, Jimmy, overrated when it comes to boards and the running of clubs? Because that's what you are ultimately, you sit on a board there to do.
Yeah. No, it's not overrated, to firstly answer your question, because sometimes having that helicopter view, you can get very close sometimes, and just using an example for recruiting, and other departments have this situation too, you can get very attached to the players you recruit because you're so invested in them working, because it reflects on you. When you have someone who's got that helicopter view, they can step back without the emotion, they can look at it, how's it balanced compared to other clubs, instead of being day to day, which is a great thing, but also it can be a bit of a hindrance in your decision making.
Trevor Nisbet, the West Coast CEO that we're talking about, was stopped at the airport a little earlier today.
On-field is what we have to fix. I mean, the club's in really good shape, except for our on-field performance, and everyone is aware of that. I mean, it's not a great position to be in. We don't like being last on the ladder with 1 win and getting, 400-point losses. Nobody likes that. But we have to fix it as quickly as we can, but it will take time. The circumstances that Adam's being dealt at the moment are unbelievable, really. I mean, when you look back on history, I don't think this has ever happened before. It's unprecedented to have 15 to 20 injuries every week.
Will the club be applying for priority draft picks?
No.
So for me, that is fascinating, and it does speak to a little bit of the entitlement at the West Coast Eagles, talking about the circumstances that have been handed to Adam Simpson. No one's saying that they haven't been unlucky with injuries. We get that. But, Damo, a couple of great columns written by Pete Ryan and Mark McGowan this week about the decisions that they have made over the last 5, 6, 7 seasons that have led to this position that they're in from a list management point of view. And it begs the question, Lloydie, where do they go next? Because there is going to be some sort of fire sale, a term that's been thrown around, about how can they get value from some of their older players.
And that's where a lot, Sam, will say that they haven't actually hit rock bottom yet. They have to with the way they're playing, but maybe not yet if you start to let go some of those older players. And to me, these are the only untouchables for me. I think the rest of the list, I'd be open to the rest of the competition to say, how can we get as many kids into this club? And you don't want to be too young, because you get belted if you're too young. But I think that I love Liam Ryan. But OK, what could we get for Liam Ryan to get another kid into the draft.
So if someone offered you a top 10 pick for Barrass, you'd still say no?
Oh, not if it was a top 10, no. I'd move him on as well. But I think that's because I just don't think they've had good kids because they've given it away through that Tim Kelly trade.
Look, you've been big on the possibilities of West Coast using what we expect to be the number one pick in the draft, given their ladder position right now, to distribute it and bring back 3 top 10s. You've been saying that for some time. Yeah. I'll put it to you, Jimmy. Yeah. As a club that actually negotiated a way to get the number one draft pick last year, would you be open to it again as a director of the GWS Giants? And should clubs and should West Coast be considering this right now?
Well, the first bit of that, once the national championships are played out, which are coming up, you get a real set on who the number 10 is, the top 10 is, and where there are bands in that first round. So if it's clear that obviously it's Harley Reid, and then we've got a big group of 5 or 6 next, that might be more appealing to someone like West Coast, but it might be also appealing for someone like ourselves, like the Giants, who do have a draft package.
So right now, ladder position says you've got draft pick number 5. This is before national academies kick in, before father-sons kick in. You've got pick 5 by the way of the ladder. You've got Richmond's pick for losing Hopper last year at pick 7 as it stands. You could lose Himmelberg as a free agent. You could get a pick between 5 and 7. You could have 5, 6 and 7 in this draft. Would that be something you would suggest to your club as football director to engage in conversation with West Coast about this number 1 pick?
Yeah, look, I think you don't rule out all possibilities. And like I said, I'm not deflecting by referencing the championships, but you actually want a real clear understanding of that top 10. Because we've seen really good drafts where there's been a really good 6 or 7 players and you could group them. It depends on what you like in that top 10, top 6 or 7 players. But if there's such a significant drop-off in between those bands, that's when you start looking at things like that. Well, do we need the extra pick, to go with it? Or do we want to move up and get the one player in particular who fits a need? A bit like Aaron Cadman. He really fits a need for what the Giants need. And then that actually helped West Coast because they wanted the 2 picks, which they took Jimby and Hewitt, 2 Western Australian kids for their midfield. So once the championships come around, you get a good line of sight, but you can't deny it. We do have a good hand, if you will, to offer West Coast something. I think Melbourne, another one who've openly said they'll have a good package of first-round picks
with
as
the
well.
Luke Jackson trade from last year.
Yeah, because they get that pick and, of course, their own pick.
And if West Coast do find that he is a bit lukewarm on it, Harley Reid of wanting to go to the West Coast Eagles, that's even another matter of go. Let's engage with a team like the Giants and try and get 3 first-rounders for number 1.
But wouldn't a club like West Coast, given the success they've had, given the relationship that they've had with the rest of the competition insofar as the draft picks they've got before from interstate, wouldn't they just back their own system in? If he's the best kid, you take the best kid, not be worried about him leaving.
But Lloydie started to touch on it at the moment. He's listed 3 players. You could maybe throw in Hewitt, Chess and maybe Long. So we've got 6 players. They've got so many areas to address. And I know Trevor Nisbet touched on it. 4 games by over 100 points. They got beaten by 18th on the ladder by over 100. They got beaten by 14th by 171.
And over history too, Jim. And over history, Sam, you look at the teams who come up quicker, like Hawthorn's draft of Roughhead Franklin and Jordan Lewis, or Geelong's with Jimmy and Stevie J and somebody, who else you got in that draft? Kelly. That's sort of how it happens, quicker rather than one player.
I think to your point about the Eagles' arrogance, which has worked for them for its entire history until 3 years ago, basically, it's out the window now. I think they've got to start again and take a new attitude.